Welcome to Anything and Everything. I'm your host, Angelo Esposito, bringing you compelling chronicles of entrepreneurship, where success means doing anything and everything. Welcome to another episode of Anything and Everything. We are here today with Luke Davies, entrepreneur, investor, currently the CEO at Tina Davies. Does a bit of everything and has a ton of business experience, so we're going to have a fun time chatting with him today. Luke, thank you for being here today.
Angelo, great to see you again, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, a pleasure. How about you tell me a bit about what Tina Davies is, since that's your current project?
So Tina Davies was kind of an accident, to be honest, and Tina's my wife. So we started this business, like about 6 years ago.
By the way, Luke, I just gotta say one funny thing. When you used to email me, I used to be like, I wonder what Tina Davies is. I didn't realize it until the day I met your wife, and then I'm like, oh, her name's Tina. That makes sense. I used to just, I was like, what is Tina Davies?
You know what's hilarious is like half the time, like it gets autocorrected to Tuna Davies, which is like even more confusing, right?
Awesome. Sorry to interrupt. Okay, so Tina Davies. So tell me where it came about and what exactly Tina Davies is.
Sure. At the time, I was leaving LinkedIn. I was, maybe a little bit like exhausted with like large corporations and the pace at which they move. Mm-hmm. And I was just trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next? I explored a bunch of different startups, most of them like relatively early stage. And my wife was kind of tinkering around with this new idea in her industry, which is permanent cosmetics. And I had a couple of job offers, some I was like really excited about. And she's like, just help me out for a month or two. Like, help me get this product off the ground. And it seemed like a small ask at the time. And like most entrepreneurs, she had a personal pain. So she had been doing permanent cosmetics for, 15 years at that point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there was a new modality that had come into play within that category, and it was called microblading. And all of the tools that were on the market at the time they were crap, essentially. Like, so most of them were made in China. Most of them like didn't have proper packaging, didn't have sterilization, and artists were forced to essentially assemble crappy tools on their own. And it was kind of sad, actually, because they'd be charging $500, $600, or $700 for a procedure, and the tools themselves were, I don't know, like less than $1, and they were shit. Like, they were total shit. So
wow.
It started with prototyping at a dining room table. Literally, like, Tina was making these things out of chopsticks, and then, a couple of trips to China, a couple of like a lot of different design sessions, patenting of IP, and eventually, a couple of months later, we came to market with our first product. And it was a very, very scrappy, kind of like 30 grand on a couple of credit cards, a single Shopify site, a single page site with one product and 2 variants. And it was almost an overnight success. So like we sold out of like all of our inventory within a couple of months.
Wow.
We had waiting lists like almost immediately. The business was profitable in month 1. So, I think maybe the big lesson for me there is like get something to market fast. Know what your audience wants and be very specific. And then, I think the other thing that we were really fortunate of is like Tina had been in the category for a long time. So that whole product marketing piece, she was just very good at because she could speak artist and she personally designed the product herself. And you're probably wondering, like, what did I do in all this, right? Because it kind of sounds like it's her little baby, but I sort of picked up all the other parts of the business. So, like, designing of the sites, building out all the infrastructure and payment, and then ultimately, like, organizing the team and the culture and the go-to-market strategy. And, flash forward to today, we're about 20 people, just under 20 million in sales.
Wow. And
for some of the SKUs that we have, we're either number 1 or number 2 globally for the products that we carry.
Wow, that's amazing. And for people listening, I just want to emphasize that part you said about about being profitable month 1. That is extremely difficult, almost impossible. So the fact that you were able to do that is honestly really, really impressive. And I guess a sign of that product market fit, right? Based on that demand. So that's insane. So I'd love to hear, like, and maybe just to go a bit deeper, because I was lucky enough to grow up very close to my sister, so when it came to, feminine products and things like that, I'm pretty aware of like what's out there. But some people might be listening and say, what the hell is microblading? Can you maybe tell our audience what is microblading?
Yeah, for sure. And anybody that's seen your mustache knows you must be familiar with products and types of products. But microblading is like it's a modality of permanent cosmetics. And in general, permanent cosmetics is the easy way to think about it is a tattoo on your face. So the vast majority of the procedures are eyebrows, like roughly 80% are eyebrows. And the target demographic is just all women and some men. It's pretty rare to see the men do it. But women can either be getting older and have sparse eyebrows. They could have overplucked and have not enough eyebrows. Maybe they want something. A lot of the women describe it as a life hack, because instead of waking up and spending 20 to 30 minutes every morning in front of the mirror trying to like get ready for their day, they just wake up and they go. So that they have extra time. They feel confident all the time. And for them, it's a big time saver.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. And so when you guys started this, I guess maybe walk people through the kind of like initial, 3 months, because there's a lot of people out there with ideas. And as entrepreneurs, you learn really quickly the ideas like the 5% of it and it's 95% execution. But, having said that, what did the first, 3 months look like? So Tina came with the idea, you realize there's kind of demand. You guys start messing with the product, get the Shopify store. How does that journey from, getting that Shopify store live then translate to, sales and growth and hiring and all that?
Mm-hmm. From the very beginning, we started engaging the community, both to help us with product design, product ideation, to ensure product market fit, but also to just establish a waiting list of people that wanted to actually purchase this and help us just get the confidence that, we're investing in something that people actually want. So before launch day, there was a lot of like leaking of pictures and like getting other artists to sort of share their frustration with the current tools in the market. And, I may have lied earlier, because I think our first site wasn't even a Shopify site. It was literally like just a widget where you can collect email addresses. And,
okay.
We did have a couple of thousand email addresses that we had built out before we even had a product. And the other thing that we did was I'm kind of a big fan of like copying stuff that works in other categories. Just because our expertise at the time wasn't necessarily digital marketing. So what we did is we went out and found, who we thought was like the absolute best at this kind of digital marketing and copied them. So for us, that was Harry's. And like Harry had like a very specific launch playbook that he used. And we essentially copied it. So we assumed that like what would work for men's razors would be pretty similar for women's eyebrow products. And it was very successful. So with that campaign, I think we pulled in like 10,000 email addresses, and we probably converted about a third of them into actual customers.
That's insane. Both the size of the list and that conversion rate is insane. 30% of that list into customers.
It was really targeted though too, right? So I think the other advantage we had was like we were in a category that was nascent at the time, like pretty insignificant, and anybody who was in that space was just not very sophisticated. So our competition was like mom and pop shops that like didn't have a good website, didn't have good email. And I think maybe there's a nugget there for folks. Like I personally really like these grubby markets that other people think aren't worthy of investment, especially if they're small, but you think that there may be an opportunity, because it's much easier to get traction, and it's much, much easier to actually own a category like that other people are ignoring.
That's interesting. And so when you first kind of think about the early days, I want to highlight just the fact that sometimes people do everything but get the customer, right? And to be honest, that was my mistake in my first few businesses, and a lot of failures, working on some successes. But the lesson for me was really and I guess maybe it's subconscious, but you end up being like, I got to perfect the product or perfect the website or the marketing message. I'm waiting for this video. You're always kind of waiting for something, but the truth is the faster you can get from A to B, which is a paying customer, the better everything becomes. The better feedback becomes, the better like hiring people becomes, the better finding investors become. And I realized, I was joking around with a buddy the other day, and I said, even if you had the worst idea, and you probably have seen this on Shark Tank as an example, but like someone might have a horrible idea and you're kind of like, who would want that? And then they mention their sales and they're like, we did $2 million this year. and then you got their attention, where you're like, oh, okay, tell me more about this ridiculous product. So I think there's something there, and there's a lesson. So for entrepreneurs out there, really laser focus on like, how do you get a paying customer or an email list or whatever it is, but getting that first part is, I think, instrumental to building a business.
I've been there, man. I started a software company back in 2006, and we over-engineered the shit out of like there was features in there that like I don't think even should have been there in year 5 or 6. Like after we had a very successful customer base, and you know, had we been much more specific with the actual core problem that we're solving, and then rallied a group of people that experienced that problem in depth, and like just given them something for free and gotten some traction, I think we would have been miles ahead of where we ended up with that business. But yeah, like the faster you can get to market and start getting feedback, and the faster you can iterate on that feedback, the better, for sure.
I love it. And just to take a step back to paint the picture, like I know you as entrepreneur investor, but before you, I mean, maybe you were always an entrepreneur at heart, but I know you also kind of dabbled in the corporate world. So I'd love to hear maybe your story of where you were from the corporate side, and then what made you kind of get into the entrepreneurial side a little more, you know, intentionally.
Yeah, okay. I've like sort of vacillated between those worlds for sure. So I started out as an accountant, and like my first job was at a huge company, which I hated. I kind of looked at my boss's job, and I'm like, if I can slug it out for 5 years, I can have her job, and that job's terrible. So, and then I moved like into recruiting, and it was like, this was in 1997 when technology companies and internet companies specifically had like vast troves of money and needed to hire people really fast. So it was just a really cool job, because I think even mediocre recruiters at the time were just really, really successful due to the volume of hiring. But what it gave me was a front row seat. The clients that we worked on were venture-backed, like high-tech, high-growth companies. It gave me a front row seat to that world. And quickly I realized, like, instead of being a service provider to that community, I want to be in that community and actually building something of value. Which led me to starting a software company, and or starting a software company with another guy. And we learned a ton. I mean, ultimately we weren't successful. We ended up winding that company up. We were, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years ahead of the market in terms of the product that we built. And we were also like probably 20 degrees off in terms of what they actually wanted. And we selected a market that was just like highly legislated and highly governed by a bunch of content rules. And I think we overestimated our ability to penetrate that as well. But what that did for me, I kind of overcompensated, you know what I mean? So I went from like a failure to like, man, I got to get a win. Like I can't have another one of these. So I joined LinkedIn, it was like 6,000 people at the time. So I think for me, the pendulum swung a little too far the other way and ended up sort of back in a big company.
Got it. And out of curiosity, you know, you don't have to go in crazy detail, but what was the problem that the software company you were building was solving?
Well, that may be the problem, Angelo. I don't know that we necessarily identified like a burning problem that people had to solve as much as we made some cool shit, you know, that we like to play with. But
got it.
You know, this was at a, like, I can tell you about the product if you're interested.
Sure.
It was a video player essentially that would like plug into any of the mainstream video players at the time. That'd be like Brightcove was probably the biggest player at the time. And what would it allow you to do is it would allow you to like leave comments in stream. So and it was like mostly designed for long form video. So if you wanted to share a segment of a long form video or leave a comment like that would line up with the actual moment in the video where it belonged, our tech enabled you to do that. And you could also like search through the video to see where popular parts were and other people were commenting and what was happening. And our grand plan was that like we would use the community to index video. Because at the time, Google would just always bring you to the front of a video. And the only way you could really start was at the beginning. But we thought, like, as people were sharing video, like, look at this cool jump shot, and share it with their buddy, effectively, our strategy was, like, to get people to describe all of the video. And then we were going to convert all those comments into XML and give Google the opportunity to deep link into any part of a video and with a bunch of context.
Wow. But
there was, there was so many mistakes along the way that never really resulted in success. We did almost end up selling it, but at the end we wound it up.
Wow. And I'd love to walk through some of those mistakes, right? I mean, if you don't mind sharing, just because like I can also walk through a book or of mistakes on my end, but I'd love to hear on your side, what were some of the mistakes you realized, you know, looking back, and you know, hindsight's 20/20, but I'd love for you to share with the audience.
Okay, for sure. I think the fact that it took us so long to get anybody to pay for it was like a pretty big red flag. Another pretty big red flag was that we always had this like internal talk track, like if we just finish this next feature, then we'll have something that's going to be viable. it wasn't that we were needing more features. It's just that we were needing to like either hit a bigger audience or hit an audience in a way that was much more impactful to them.
Right.
And I think personally, I was like a little disoriented with the market feedback that we got, because we were successful at booking meetings and getting mind share with like the biggest and most successful media companies around the world. So like we were in New York every other week, meeting with Disney, meeting with ESPN, meeting with like all of the major media outlets.
Right.
And all the deals would progress. Everybody was interested. Everybody wanted to do something, but nobody could pull the trigger on paying anything. So I think there's two things. One, nobody from our team actually came from the media space, and we weren't necessarily able to interpret like that's kind of what they do with all tech because they're curious and they don't want to be left behind. But also like we just weren't able to clarify the problem that we were solving well enough to build something to solve it.
Big lesson there. I mean, people all say this in a variety of ways, but the whole idea of like, building a vitamin versus a painkiller, right? And I think that one rings so true for especially tech businesses, but most businesses. And that idea of like, are you solving a real painful problem, or is it just like this nice to have cool thing? And there's nothing wrong with having nice to have cool things, just might not be economically viable in terms of, you know what I mean? But that's super interesting, because I've gone through similar things where like, I've got attached to building something kind of cool and getting a few clients, and then, you kind of get looped in the vision of what could happen, and you kind of forget about the reality of like, hey, I got to build a business. Like I need customers, I got to build a team, and you kind of get in the product side and on the, imagination side. So at what point did you guys realize, like how long were you doing that before you're like, hey, I'm sure that things were maybe growing, you're hiring people, whatever, and at one point you decide this is not working? Like what was that moment?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the most glaring sign for me was like when I realized that I was like the most prolific user of the software. Like, wait a second, if I'm using it the most, then we've got a problem here.
I love the honesty. That's awesome.
But when we did realize, we did like a lot of companies try to pivot at the end. So our pivot was, instead of like trying to sell this into content companies that already had like pretty thin margins, we built something similar but different that we could just release to end users, and like it could just like be a plugin on top of YouTube. And we actually got quite a bit of traction with that, but I think we're just a bit too late. So for that, I think we had like 6 weeks of burn left, and we're like, fuck it, we're going all in on something else. We're giving up on the current strategy. And within 4 weeks, our dev team had a product that was like really cool and actually got quite a bit of traction on top of YouTube. Wow. But again, we sort of ran into this like content licensing issue. So yeah, it basically allowed like any users to like develop a highlight reel of like videos that they like. It's not a big deal today, but when we made it, it was literally like these really cool like editing tools that would sit on top of any YouTube video and just allow you to make a highlight reel and share it with your buddies.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's because we take it for granted today, because that kind of stuff exists, and you could share the YouTube part, or even like tools like Descript or whatnot, like where you can text a video. But yeah, you were to think about it, like what year was that? You said that was late
2006. Okay, yeah, 2006,
wow.
2007.
So like close to 20 years ago. Wow. So yeah, definitely ahead of the time. And so just to paint the picture, you went from that, then you said you went to LinkedIn, right? What made you so Pendulum's going back and forth. So now you're in LinkedIn. What did you learn there? I mean, that you can share in terms of just maybe then Pendulum swinging back to the entrepreneur life.
It's so funny. All the things I hated about LinkedIn, like all the like processes for things and like all the management techniques, as an employee, I'm like, fuck, this is a pain in the ass. I've actually implemented like the vast majority of them at Tina Davies Professional now, like, and the team loves it, right? So like, I guess I realized the anomaly there was probably me. Like I'm like the lone wolf entrepreneur guy that doesn't, I don't like things over explained to me or like, and I don't like close boundaries, but other people do, right? Like other people actually want to know how they're going to be successful and how they're going to be measured, and they care deeply about those things. And I just never did. But the rude awakening was when I just kept getting feedback from my own team that we just had to be tighter, on processes and on systems. And I guess I took for granted that most people actually want to be led and they want to be managed. And to get success out of them, you kind of have to break it down for them and show them the steps and then help them along the way. And it was a hard lesson for me because I'm the exact opposite. Like, I'm like, get out of my way. I'll figure this out. You know what I mean? And it was just ironic, I guess.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's true. It's one thing, and I don't know if it's all entrepreneurs, but I was very similar in that sense where I didn't like structure. I mean, actually, I never actually worked for any large corporation of how much I did not like structure. I was always doing my own things or trying or attempting to build my own things. And so I didn't even have that exposure to process. But then once I started realizing how important it was, it's a game changer, right? It's like you can sleep at night because you know there's processes that people can rely on that are repeatable, that are scalable. And it's like, I know it sounds so boring and dull, but it's such a key part to scale any business is having repeatable processes. Like it's boring, but it's necessary. And now I kind of got into them. I got into them for little things, for creating content. Like even this podcast right here, from filming it to then passing it off to my editor, then someone's going to cut it into shorts. So it's really interesting to see if someone's going to caption it and then someone's going to schedule it. So like even that process has a process around it.
It's worth it. You can go faster, right? You can go faster, and you can go faster with people that don't necessarily have to be like highly strategic people.
Right. That's very true. And so post LinkedIn, was it right after LinkedIn? Is that when Tina Davies started, or was there something between that?
There was nothing in between. I literally just resigned, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something else.
That's awesome.
Like, I wasn't jumping for anything.
And it went from helping out your wife, help her out for a month, to then being running this thing. So I'd love to know more about that journey. So first 3 months, obviously, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's anything like most entrepreneurs, it's probably a bit of a roller coaster, and a lot of ups and a lot of downs. So it sounds like for you, the good thing is things kind of started up. Now, post, sales are coming in, 10,000 subscribers and 3,000 bought, like things are great. What's the next kind of hurdle you hit, and how do you overcome that?
Well, we got all the sales. That was one challenge, but what we didn't consider when we launched was that logistically, like filling all of those orders, the sales came in from 43 countries. I probably should have mentioned that. So like logistically getting the right products in the right place immediately was like kind of a challenge. And it also exposed like some of the gaps we had with the product. So as an example, the adherent that we used to seal the packaging of the actual microblade that holds in the sterility component of it wasn't the greatest if it was exposed to a 10 or 12 hour airplane ride. So as I'm moving these products all over the world, I'm realizing everything in Australia is a write-off because like the packages have opened up. And then we did an event in Las Vegas, and then we ended up needing a whole bunch of product there. And like what started out as like really high margin product got eaten into pretty quickly in the first couple of months because I was literally like shipping around these boxes of microblades all over the world before they could get to a customer, just to preserve the brand and satisfy customers' needs as soon as we possibly could. We kind of aided on profitability for the first couple months.
Wow. And did that pay off? So like, obviously, you want to have that, I guess, good word of mouth. So looking back, did that pay off to making that move?
It did. I think it was like probably a double-edged sword for us. What it resulted in was us being like a micro national is what I call us, because like we do operate now in a whole bunch of different countries, but we're not quite big enough from a people perspective to support all the administration that goes along with that. So there's a lot of like administrative like headaches that come along with it that may not be worth it. So if I was looking at our business purely from a profit perspective, we would probably do better if we dumped 4 or 5 countries and just focused on the winners and just did a really good job there. But once that ship sailed, it's kind of hard to bring it back into the station because we have all these like loyal customers in all over the world now that we don't want to stop serving.
Interesting. And so what was your, I'd love to know from the growth perspective, what was your main kind of client acquisition model? Like how were you guys getting customers?
Yeah, at the very beginning, it was like organic posts on Facebook and Facebook groups was the main driver, coupled with a couple of like contests that helped us like really scale out our email address or our email list. From there, we started doing lives, like live Instagram sessions where we would do a lot of like education and product marketing around the products, like how to use them, how to get good results with them. And they were all free. So like the thing that we did different than the rest of our market was education in our category is like super important. It's a very technical skill. It takes a long time to get good at it. So anybody that is good at it is able to charge a lot of money for these courses and for education. And instead of saying, let's charge for education, we just like gave everything away for free. So we literally mapped out like what an artist would need to do to go from zero to be like a very seasoned professional. And then we chopped up that content and disseminated it across all the channels. And what it did was it gave us a larger audience than we would have got. And it provided some brand affinity as well, because like we actually started exposing how to actually be successful without having to go into like a walled garden and deal with somebody that may or may not even be an expert. So I think that was probably the biggest thing, like just giving away free advice that other people would charge a lot of money for. That helped us a lot. And then it wasn't until probably 3.5, 4 years ago where we started to like aggressively go after like paid social as a channel to bring customers in. And we were fortunate that like we were doing cohort analysis and tracking cohorts, and like it was really clear for us like what the lifetime value of our customers were. So, and we had enough margin in our products that we were able to spend pretty aggressively on Facebook, and we were able, and Instagram, those are the places we primarily spend. We were able to grow our artist ecosystem to about 80,000 artists that come into the, like, touch one of our, pieces of content or websites over the course of a month. And that was huge for us. So we were able to like more than double in size just by having an efficient, well thought out paid media strategy.
Wow. And on the paid side, for people maybe listening, wanting to get into that, can you maybe touch on what, I know it's a common term people like to use, customer acquisition and lifetime value. For you guys, what did that ratio have to be for it to really make sense? And how did you go about maybe measuring that?
We were a little conservative with our lifetime value estimates. So we would just use a year, even though like many of our customers would continue to buy from us like year after year after year. Right. And we're fortunate that our market, we sell mostly consumable stuff, right? So if you buy a product from us, you use it once and then you have to throw it away. And if you're going to be in business, you have to come back and buy more stuff. So loyalty is like one of our most important measures. And for us, like we were willing at the time to spend our lifetime value for a customer. We would also measure it based on lifetime profit of a customer, not the actual revenue we get from a customer. It was sitting around like somewhere around $115. And there was a period of like probably a year and a half where we would happily spend up to $100 per customer, knowing that they would all eventually be profitable.
That's super interesting. And so you guys were mainly doing Instagram, Facebook, education first, which makes a ton of sense. Give free stuff so you guys become that kind of leader, authority, or whatever you want to see it. Start building up that loyal base, and then from there, then doubling down with paid ads, reaching very specific targeted people. Fast forward to today, is that still the main channel? Because I know just personally on our side, Facebook's always evolving and paid side's getting a bit less predictable for us, at least on the Facebook side. I'd love to hear from you. Is it still a lot of paid Insta, Facebook, or are there other channels you guys are exploring?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that obsesses me right now is community. And it's partly due to the fact that I work in a small market and they do reference each other all the time for tricks and tips and technique and support, frankly, like encouragement. And I think the company in our category that's able to unite all of the artists and actually unite specifically the ones that want to help each other get better outcomes for themselves and for their clients will be the winner. So what we're experimenting with is like, how do you provide them with content and with tools and with engagement and with friendship and with mentorship so that their careers can get better? And knowing that, sort of we were either the catalyst or the place that happened.
That's super cool.
And I just believe that's just a much stickier approach than like enticing somebody with an ad and getting a purchase, and then, you know, hoping that, you know, your support team and all your other loyalty plays will work. Like I think that just like helping your customers actually succeed and helping them grow their own careers is kind of where we're mostly focused. And that gets cheaper and cheaper over time, right? Because then your customers become your advocates, and then, you know, there is that nice loop that happens when people are happy and they attribute their success to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, community, you know, it's funny, we're also looking at that, like how do you actually build a community, and at least on the restaurant side, right? How do you build something? I guess it's what Facebook groups were, but kind of to the next level, right? And really building something so people can collaborate, talk to each other, grow, educate, right? Share. So it's definitely makes sense. So for you, I guess, what's next steps with Tina Davies, and what are next steps for you? What are you up to these days? I'm sure, like any entrepreneur, you always got that kind of itch. So I'd love to hear kind of like what's interesting you these days, and what's on your radar.
We still have a lot to do at Tina Davies. Like, so for us, we're a product company and we're a marketing company first and foremost. So we've got a product roadmap that's quite extensive, and takes us out for the next couple of years. And most of those are physical products. So like just better ink and better cartridges and better tools. Coupled with physical products, we do provide like educational courses. So we've got a bunch of those planned.
Nice.
And our intentions are to change that from like an a la carte offering to a subscription-based offering, so that, and that this would tie in with the community. So like there's the base community, and then there's like the paid tier of the community where they get, you know, free content, as well as like preferential treatment on our site and just other things, you know, probably some coaching that would come along with that as well.
Nice.
So the roadmap for Tina Davies over the next couple of years is pretty baked. You know, I think the hard part is the execution, which is, you know, we're sort of getting into now to make sure that we can actually achieve our goals. But for me personally, like, I mean, my enthusiasm and I think my strength, frankly, is the beginning, right? Like the sort of tip of the spear, trying to figure out how to get that product market fit, and then, you know, find the willing participants that'll try your software out or try your product out and give you that feedback required to actually turn it into a viable business. So I suspect I'll go back to either a personal problem or somebody else who's like spent a lot of time like trying to figure out a problem and has like some either like strong traction against it, or at least a bunch of experiments against it, and try to figure out how to start another company.
I love it. And then I guess maybe just to wrap things up, one thing I like to end off the show with is just sharing some, you know, words of wisdom, or at least, you know, key mistakes that you made, or lessons, you know. And I know it's hard to wrap up and give 20 lessons, but if you can share maybe one or two takeaways or mistakes you made at Tina Davies, I think that'd be super helpful, you know, for our audience. And I'm sure you made more than one or two, but, you know, for people going into the e-commerce space, and I know yours is more complicated because you're not drop shipping stuff, you're creating your own stuff, it's a marketing company, it's a community, so it's a whole different beast. But I'd love to hear from you. What are some things looking back that you would have said, how I would have done this differently?
You know, this is for me, it's the people. It's always like, and I think most entrepreneurs kind of say the same thing, like getting the right team and getting the team all going in the same direction, and getting them to believe that, you know, if you can reach that goal, then there's, you know, there's massive both like corporate and personal success at the end, is the hardest part. But if I was to go back and sort of redo some things, I think at the beginning, I would have worked harder to try to attract higher level talent. And I would have been a lot faster to act when it was clear that I didn't have higher level talent. Like, I think that was the biggest lesson. Like, yeah, like, I think you tend to know, like, within the first 30 to 60 days, kind of what you have on your hands with a new hire. And the biggest mistake that I made, repeatedly, actually, I've stopped now, but like, is just sort of dragging that out, you know, and hoping that there'll be a change and hoping that there'll be an improvement. And, you know, I think that smart entrepreneurs take that 90-day probation period like very seriously, and just like admit their mistakes and move on. It's hard to do when you're like one or two or 5 or 8 people, because it's expensive, right? It's like the investment in a new person is massive.
Right.
But the faster you can accept those losses, I think the better off you'll be. And it's also a mechanism just to protect your culture, right? Because you're going to get some stars on the team, hopefully. And the thing that frustrates high performance people the most is just people that don't carry their weight. And you gotta make those changes fast. I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned. And also just maybe to be more, going into this company, I thought it was great at recruiting and assessing people. And, I think that was an oversight. I think I've learned a ton just operating this business around where my own personal gaps were and how important it is to just ensure that you're getting the absolute best person.
That's awesome to hear. And then can you share what you do? I'm sure you can't give all your secrets, but like when you are interviewing candidates, like are there certain things you do? Because it's not an easy process. And like you said, at least you have that kind of 90-day probation period. But what do you look for, when you're first hiring for a role?
I think it depends. It depends on like the role itself and the stage of your company. But if it's early stage,
Yeah.
I would before you hire anybody, I would get really super clear on what your mission is as a company and what kind of culture you want to build. And then I would document it and I would like make it like I would define it and I wouldn't deviate from it. Like we're the company that's going to do this. And for us at Tina Davies, like, our objective is to empower artists and like and to help female entrepreneurs build out careers in this category. And the cool thing about having a mission that's a real mission is it enables you to attract people that are a little bit like, it allows you to punch over your weight class a little bit. You can get people that like maybe you don't deserve at this stage that are like better than you could actually normally attract because they are attracted to your mission statement. And that worked for us. Like we were able to attract some women onto our team that are rock stars, like absolute rock stars that probably wouldn't be hanging around with us if we didn't like care deeply about our mission statement. And they buy into it, right? Because it aligns with their own personal belief system.
That's awesome.
So that's one thing. So have a culture, define your mission, and then find people that actually share that objective, and not just say, "Oh yeah, I want to do that too." Like where there's evidence of them actually living up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is like, I just look for a track record of people that have done hard things over and over again, and they've built that muscle of like grit and determination, and are able to like solve complex problems without a lot of help. And that's a lot of that evidence like comes through on resumes and comes through in terms of what people do. But we also make it, one of the things we do is we force people to do a case study to sort of prove that they can think strategically and do some critical thinking on their own and hand something in on time without errors and like just the basics of like you get a little preview of what it's going to be like once you actually hire them.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you for that. And on our end, I think we try to do that. It's for most of the positions, some positions is hard, but for most positions, we do exactly that. We have a trial period, and it's funny you mentioned, but it's all those nuances that you might not think of, but the details. How are they responsive? Are they late to meetings? Are they good at wording emails? Are they good at deliverables? And it's like things that might not be on the skills in terms of the exact job you're looking for, but it's things you just assume they have that then you're like, oh, they didn't. And another thing that's worked for me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, during that time period, I think it's super important to remember you're seeing their absolute best,
Exactly.
right? Like in that honeymoon phase, or in or that dating phase, if you will, before they're actually hired.
Yeah,
that's the absolute best version of them, right? So if you catch a spelling mistake or a typo or a late email, and like it's great to run them through some hoops too, right? Like force some interaction on the channels that they're going to have to communicate on once they come to work with you.
Yeah,
and like. No, and then it rarely gets better than that after they're hired. I mean, I think in some cases it does, but my experience is that you kind of seen their best at the beginning.
Yeah, it's true, and I think the dating analogy is right on. Right? Like if there's red flags in the honeymoon phase, good luck. Like things are only gonna get worse, right? Like things get tougher. So same thing there, and it's funny. I depending on the role, there's little tricks and tips, but one little trick, and I don't know if this is good or not, but it's worked for me. When I hire salespeople, sometimes I purposely don't follow up, and I just want to see if they're gonna follow up, because it's like, and you see the difference right away. Someone's like, "Hey, Angelo, I just wanted to bring this to the top of your email. You know, you said you would introduce me to this, whatever, right?" And it's funny because you kind of weed out people who want it, or people who are just applying to 50 jobs and waiting on who's going to reply back. So it's a nice way to kind of weed people out on that side.
Oh, I think we could talk for days about how to evaluate salespeople and little tricks to figure out how they operate. I think you should do a podcast just on that.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Well, Luke, I appreciate the time and the insight. Entrepreneur, investor, CEO of Tina Davies, just crushing it. So thank you for being here today and sharing some wisdom with our audience.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Angelo. Good to see you. And thank you for having me.
Feel free to check out Wisp.ai for more resources and schedule a demo with one of our product specialists to see if it's a fit for you.